The wind howled like a starving wolf across the Montana plains. The snow had fallen thick that morning, turning the world white and silent, muffling every hoofbeat and snapping branch. Calder Briggs tugged his collar up higher and squinted into the distance, reins loose in one hand, rifle slung behind his saddle. He hadn't seen another soul in 3 days, and that was how he liked it. He wasn't looking for company, or trouble, or hope. Hope had died with his wife and their baby 5 winters ago. The ranch sat heavy and alone on the edge of nowhere. Just Calder, a half-collapsed barn, 3 aging horses, and enough silence to make a man forget how to speak. He was returning from checking the north line fence when he saw them. 3 small shapes huddled under a cluster of bare trees near the frozen creek. At first, he thought it was a pile of abandoned sacks or maybe lost livestock, until one of them moved. Children. Calder's boots hit the snow hard as he slid from the saddle. "Hey!" he called, voice low but urgent. "Hey now!" The oldest, a girl, maybe 7, raised her head. Her lips were blue, her arms wrapped tight around the 2 younger ones beside her. A boy, and a little girl who looked barely 5. All 3 were wrapped in threadbare blankets, their shoes soaked through. "We didn't take nothing," the girl croaked. "We just needed to stop." Calder's heart clenched, not in pity, but in recognition. He'd seen those eyes before. In the mirror, the year his world ended. "Don't move," he said gently, already stripping the bedroll off his saddle. "You're not in trouble, but you stay out here any longer, and you won't make it till sundown." He lifted the smallest girl first. She weighed almost nothing, and placed her gently on his horse's blanket. The boy whimpered but clung to his sister. Calder wrapped them one by one in whatever warmth he had, then turned back toward his ranch. They didn't ask where they were going. They just followed, silent and shivering. That night, the fire in Calder's hearth burned brighter than it had in years. The children slept in his old bedroom, wrapped in quilts stitched long ago by hands that were now dust. He didn't sleep. He just sat by the fire, staring into the flames, a question echoing in his bones. Why were they out there? And where was their mother? Morning came slow and gray. The storm had passed, but the snow remained, clean and cruel in the way only a Montana winter could be. Calder stood at the stove frying what little bacon he had left, the cast iron spitting and hissing like it hadn't in weeks. Behind him, a small voice spoke. "Is this your house?" He turned. The oldest girl stood in the doorway, her feet bare on the wooden floor, her eyes guarded but curious. She hugged her arms tightly around a too thin frame. "It is," Calder replied. "And for now, it's yours too." She hesitated, then stepped forward. "My brother's name is Jesse, he's 6, and the little one is Ruby. And you?" "I'm May. You hungry, May?" She nodded slowly. The 3 of them ate at the kitchen table like strangers sitting at a borrowed life, tentative, wide-eyed, and unsure when it might be taken away. Jesse didn't say much, but Ruby reached for a piece of biscuit with trembling fingers and whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Cowboy." Calder managed to smile. It felt strange on his face. "You kids got people?" he asked gently. "Family nearby? Someone looking for you?" Silence. Then May looked down. "Mama told us to stay quiet. Said if something happened, we should run north." "What happened?" May didn't answer right away. "Mama didn't wake up," she whispered. Calder leaned back in his chair, his throat tightening. "Where?" "In the wagon, by the frozen river. She got sick, tried to keep going, but her hands were cold when I touched them." Jesse sniffed beside her. "She said she was going to take us to a new place, where no one hit us, where we didn't have to sleep in barns." Calder felt something deep inside him crack. "She ever say where you were going?" May nodded. "She had a paper said Marietta. I think that's a town." He knew it. 2 days' ride south. "Did she say who you were going to meet?" May shook her head. "Just said he was kind. Said his letters were soft." Calder stood slowly, rubbing his jaw. Something about this didn't sit right. 3 kids abandoned in a snowstorm, a promise of safety, a mother who never made it, and a stranger, somewhere, who may not even know they were coming. "You're not going back out there," Calder said firmly. "Not till I know what's waiting." May stared at him. "Why are you helping us?" Calder looked at the 3 of them, their tiny hands, their silent pain, their eyes older than their years. "Because no one helped me when I needed it most." The next morning, Calder left before sunrise. He saddled his oldest horse, Milo, calm and sure-footed, and packed light. A rifle, some jerky, a flask of coffee, and a folded note he found tucked inside May's coat. It was wrinkled, stained, and torn near the edges, but he could still read the name at the top. Mr. Simon Fletcher, Marietta, Montana. Back at the cabin, May stood at the door watching him. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To find the man your mama trusted." She nodded once. He might not be kind. That's why I'm bringing a gun. It was a long, cold ride. The trail to Marietta wound through frozen creeks, brittle trees, and hills dusted white. Calder hadn't ridden into town in over a year, not since the day he buried his wife and swore off the noise of strangers. But this wasn't about him anymore. This was about 3 small souls left behind by a woman who'd gambled everything on a promise. By midday, he reached Marietta. It wasn't much. Just a rail stop, a saloon, a church, and a general store with smoke curling from its chimney. The sheriff leaned against a post outside the jailhouse, sipping coffee from a tin cup. "Well, I'll be," he muttered. "Calder Briggs. Thought you'd disappeared." "Just got quiet," Calder said, dismounting. "Looking for a man named Simon Fletcher." The sheriff squinted. "Simon, he's the undertaker." "Undertaker?" Calder's brow furrowed. "Yeah, came from back east, keeps to himself, lives behind the chapel." Calder followed the sheriff's directions. Behind the small white chapel sat a low wooden home and a barn with black shutters. He knocked once on the door. It opened slowly. Simon Fletcher stood in the shadows, mid-50s, neatly dressed, eyes hollow. "Can I help you?" Calder held out the letter. "A woman was coming here. She had 3 children. This was addressed to you." Simon's hands trembled as he took it. He read it twice. His face fell. "Her name was Clara. She wrote me letters for months. Said she was running, that she wanted her children to grow up somewhere safe. I sent money. Promised to help her start again. She never made it." Simon closed his eyes. "Lord have mercy." They sat by the fire for a while. Simon listened as Calder told him everything. About the river, the snow, the way May wrapped herself around her siblings like a mother guarding cubs. "Are you kin?" Simon asked. "No," Calder said. "Just found them." "Then why'd you take them in?" "Because I couldn't leave them." Simon looked toward the fire, eyes glassy. "I meant to marry Clara when she arrived. Thought maybe I could be a father to those little ones. But now—" His voice cracked. "They still need one," Calder said softly. The wind howled as Calder rode back from Marietta. Snow had begun falling again, thick and soft, like cotton dropped from the clouds. The road home stretched long and cold, but his heart carried something heavier than the saddle packs. Simon had offered to take the children in. He had land, money, a warm home. He said he owed it to Clara. But Calder had looked into May's eyes and seen something deeper than duty. He'd seen trust, and he wasn't sure if he could give her up. When he arrived, dusk had painted the hills in deep indigo. The cabin windows glowed amber. Smoke curled from the chimney like a promise. As he pushed open his door, 3 faces turned. May sat at the table, stirring a pot of beans. Luke ran to him, arms wide. Ruth peeked from the blanket fort she'd built in the corner. "You came back," May said, trying not to sound too relieved. "Always will," Calder answered, kneeling to hug Luke. He hung his coat, then sat by the fire. May waited, silent. "I found Simon Fletcher," he said. "Your mama's friend." "Did he know about us?" "He did. He sent money, promised her a new life." May blinked. "So he wants us?" "He offered," Calder said carefully. "He's a decent man." There was a pause. "And you?" she asked. "What about me? Do you want us?" Her voice was quiet, fragile. Calder's chest tightened. "I didn't think I did. I didn't plan on any of this, but then I watched you take care of them. I saw Luke laugh again. I heard Ruth sing this morning when she thought no one listened." "And now?" He looked at her. "This girl too grown for her years, too small for her burdens. Now I don't want to imagine this place without you." The cabin went still. Even the fire seemed to hush. "So, we stay?" Ruth asked softly. Calder reached across the table and took May's hand. "You stay if you want." Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "Mama would have liked it here," she whispered. That night, Calder fixed the loose plank on the front porch. He patched the hole in the barn roof. He stayed up sharpening tools and oiling hinges. He didn't say it aloud, but he knew. He wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, the land would feel alive again with the sound of laughter. The snow melted early that week. By Wednesday, the ground was slick with mud and the creeks overflowed with icy runoff. It felt like the land itself was beginning to stir from a long, hard sleep. So was Calder. He found himself rising earlier, whistling as he shoveled paths or fed the animals. The kids followed him like ducklings. Luke, stubbornly trying to carry water. Ruth chasing chickens in her muddy boots. And May helping with everything from laundry to fence mending. There was life again. Purpose. But peace never lasts long on the frontier. That afternoon, a wagon creaked down the path. Calder was in the field chopping kindling when he spotted the lone rider beside it. An older man in a wide brown coat, hat pulled low. Dust clung to his sleeves despite the wet, and the reins in his hand trembled slightly. May stepped out onto the porch. The man tipped his hat. "Calder Rourke," he called. Calder wiped his hands and walked over. That's me. Name's Otis Howell. I rode from Helena on behalf of a Miss Clara Simmons. Calder froze. He'd never heard the children's last name before. Not officially. She's dead, Calder said. Otis nodded solemnly. I know. I'm here because of her last letter. She wrote it weeks before she passed. He handed Calder a sealed envelope, old but intact. She asked me to deliver it if anything ever happened to her. Calder stepped back, staring at the neat handwriting. May clutched Ruth's hand. Who is he? She whispered. Friend of your mother's, I reckon. Calder muttered. He didn't open the letter then. Instead, he invited Otis in, offered him stew and coffee. They sat around the table, and for once, the kids were quiet. Clara worked at the medical post in Helena, Otis said. We all knew she wanted to leave. She spoke of Texas, of freedom. He turned to May. You look just like her, child. May's eyes shone with tears. That night, Calder opened the letter by lamplight. It read, To whoever finds this, if I am gone, please find my children. Keep them safe. They are not just orphans. They are a light in this dark world. If they've made it to you, know that you've been chosen. Protect them. Guide them. And if you can, let them feel love again. Clara Simmons. Calder read it twice. Then he folded the letter, tucked it in his coat pocket, and stood quietly by the fire. May came in moments later. You okay? He looked at her, so brave, so unsure, still just a girl carrying the weight of a mother. She chose right, Calder said. Huh? Your mama, she picked someone to trust. You? I hope I'm worthy of that trust. The days that followed were quieter. The children still played, chores still filled the morning, and Calder still sat on the porch each evening with a cup of coffee in hand. But something had shifted. Clara's letter hadn't just stirred memories. It had opened a door that couldn't be shut again. Otis remained for 2 more nights. He'd traveled far, and his bones ached from the journey. Calder offered him the loft above the barn, but Otis spent most of his time with the children, telling them stories of their mother, stories she had never been able to finish telling. She once broke her arm trying to save a foal during a blizzard, Otis said to Ruth, who was nestled beside him. But she never screamed, not once. Said the pain was worth it if the creature lived. Did it? Ruth asked. Sure did. That colt followed her everywhere after that. May listened with wide eyes, absorbing every word like sacred scripture. On the morning of Otis's departure, Calder saddled his horse and prepared to ride with him part of the way. As he tightened the girth strap, Otis approached him with a strange look. There's something else I didn't tell you. Calder raised an eyebrow. I figured. Otis looked over his shoulder, as if making sure the children weren't near. Clara wasn't just running from an old life, someone was chasing her. Calder stiffened. A man from Kansas. Called himself Eberson. Worked for a mining syndicate that Clara's late husband once crossed. After he died, they wanted her to repay the debt, with labor or worse. So she ran, and she took evidence with her. Proof of how they laundered money through land claims. I think she planned to bring it to someone here. And now they'll come looking, Calder said grimly. Otis nodded. That's why I came now. The syndicate's men passed through Helena last week, asking questions. If they catch wind of where she went, they'll come. Later that evening, Calder sat in the darkened kitchen. The kids had gone to bed. The ranch was silent, save for the wind moaning against the shutters. He lit a single oil lamp and spread the documents Otis had secretly given him across the table. Land deeds. Names. Bank transfers. Clara had kept it all, scrawled in hurried handwriting, hidden between pages of a worn medical journal. She wasn't just a mother, Calder whispered. She was a fighter. May's voice startled him. What are you going to do? She stood at the door in her nightgown, hair messy, eyes worried. Calder didn't lie. Protect what she gave me. Us? Yes, May, you, and everything that came with you. She walked forward and placed her small hand on his. Then we'll help you fight. The next day, Calder woke with the weight of decisions pressing down on him like saddle iron. He couldn't risk staying quiet, not when danger was riding toward them, but he also couldn't risk uprooting the children again. They had barely begun to feel safe. Ruth was sleeping through the night now. Eli had stopped flinching at loud noises. And May, she'd started to hum when she washed dishes, the way Clara once had. So Calder made a plan. The first step, lock down the ranch. He rode into town under the pretense of buying supplies but returned with more than oats and salt. He brought nails, boards, oil for lamps, and 3 new rifles. This place ain't a fortress, Old Mags told him as he strapped everything down. But it's home. You fight different when you're protecting that. Calder didn't argue. That night, he called the children into the living room. The fire crackled behind them, throwing flickers on the wood walls. I need to tell you all something. he began, his voice low. Your mother was brave, but she was also hunted. That past might come knocking. May sat upright. Eli grabbed Ruth's hand. Are we going to run again? May asked. No, Calder said. Not this time. If we run now, we'll run forever. And I'm too tired for that. You deserve Roots. We'll help, Eli said softly. I can watch the road. And I can hide Ruth, May added. Calder almost smiled. They were children, but they had the hearts of warriors. The following days were spent preparing. They reinforced windows, cleaned the old storm cellar, and trained. Calder taught May how to load and fire a rifle. Eli learned to ride and signal from the hills. Ruth, too small to fight, learned where to hide and how to remain silent for hours. You teach us like we're soldiers, May once said. You're more than that, Calder replied. You're the future of this place, the soul of it. At night, he read Clara's notes, trying to decipher just how much danger they were in. Names kept recurring in her documents. Eberson, K. Grange, H. Boone. Men tied to land thefts, false rail contracts, and deaths buried under false reports. It wasn't just greed, it was organized destruction. And Clara had run straight into their shadows. One dawn, as the fog rolled in low across the pasture, Eli came sprinting from the ridge. Riders, he gasped. 3 of them, coming fast. Calder calmly handed him the flare gun. Go to the cellar. Take your sisters. If I don't send May up in an hour, ride to Mag's. She'll know what to do. And you? I'll be right here. He walked to the porch, rifle in hand, heart steady. The next day, Calder woke with the weight of decisions pressing down on him like saddle iron. He couldn't risk staying quiet. Not when danger was riding toward them. But he also couldn't risk uprooting the children again. They had barely begun to feel safe. Ruth was sleeping through the night now. Eli had stopped flinching at loud noises. And May, she'd started to hum when she washed dishes, the way Clara once had. So Calder made a plan. The first step, lock down the ranch. He rode into town under the pretense of buying supplies, but returned with more than oats and salt. He brought nails, boards, oil for lamps, and 3 new rifles. This place ain't a fortress, old Mags told him as he strapped everything down. But it's home. You fight different when you're protecting that. Calder didn't argue. That night, he called the children into the living room. The fire crackled behind them, throwing flickers on the wood walls. I need to tell you all something, he began, his voice low. Your mother was brave, but she was also hunted. That past might come knocking. May sat upright. Eli grabbed Ruth's hand. Are we going to run again? May asked. No, Calder said. Not this time. If we run now, we'll run forever. And I'm too tired for that. You deserve Roots. We'll help, Eli said softly. I can watch the road. And I can hide Ruth, May added. Calder almost smiled. They were children, but they had the hearts of warriors. The following days were spent preparing. They reinforced windows, cleaned the old storm cellar, and trained. Calder taught May how to load and fire a rifle. Eli learned to ride and signal from the hills. Ruth, too small to fight, learned where to hide and how to remain silent for hours. You teach us like we're soldiers, May once said. You're more than that, Calder replied. You're the future of this place, the soul of it. At night, he read Clara's notes, trying to decipher just how much danger they were in. Names kept recurring in her documents. Eberson, K. Grange, H. Boone. Men tied to land thefts, false rail contracts, and deaths buried under false reports. It wasn't just greed. It was organized destruction, and Clara had run straight into their shadows. One dawn, as the fog rolled in low across the pasture, Eli came sprinting from the ridge. Riders, he gasped. 3 of them, coming fast. Calder calmly handed him the flare gun. Go to the cellar. Take your sisters. If I don't send May up in an hour, ride to Mag's. She'll know what to do. And you? I'll be right here. He walked to the porch, rifle in hand, heart steady. Calder stood tall on the porch as 3 riders crested the ridge. Their silhouettes were black against the morning mist, like phantoms from a grave he hadn't dug deep enough. The wind tugged at his coat, and he felt the weight of the rifle across his chest, not just as a weapon, but as a promise. He would not let them take anything else. The lead rider dismounted first. He was a square-shouldered man with cold eyes and a smooth, city-polished voice. You Calder Briggs? He asked. Who's asking? Name's Royce Gentry. We're looking for some kids. Said to have run off with a woman named Clara. Ring a bell? Calder didn't answer. He let silence speak louder than lies. Royce stepped closer. See? Clara made a lot of trouble. Stole something she shouldn't have. Important ledgers, contracts, proof. Calder's grip tightened. So Clara had taken more than just her children. She'd taken leverage. Now, Maybe you think you're doing something noble, hiding those little brats. But you're only delaying the inevitable. Royce's smile chilled him more than the cold wind. You hand them over, we walk away, otherwise. He glanced over his shoulder. One of the riders cocked a shotgun. You'll get nothing, Calder said, except regret. The words didn't shake, and neither did his aim. Royce laughed. Brave, stupid but brave. He turned, waving his men back. We'll be back. And next time we're not asking. They rode off in a trail of dust and hooves. Calder watched until they disappeared behind the hills, then exhaled for the first time. His legs trembled slightly, but not from fear, from restraint. Back in the cellar, May clutched Ruth, and Eli stood at the ready with the flare gun. Did they take anything? May asked. Only a good look at what they're up against, Calder said grimly. He sat with them in the candlelight, the rifle resting across his knees. They'll come back. We don't run anymore. But we also don't wait to be hunted. He looked at the children, his jaw set. We prepare. We gather allies. We turn this land into something worth defending. That night, he wrote letters. To Mags, to the pastor in the next town, to Sheriff Harlan, a man who owed him a favor from long ago. He placed them in Eli's saddlebag. At dawn, he told the boy, ride like the wind. Don't stop till they're delivered. Eli nodded. No longer the shy child Calder had first found, but something steadier, fiercer. In the dark, Calder stood at the kitchen window, watching the horizon. He thought of Clara's hands, her fire, her courage, and the 3 little sparks she'd left behind. They weren't just children. They were the resistance. The morning arrived bitter and gray, a thin veil of frost brushing every fence post and branch like breath from an unseen giant. Calder watched Eli disappear down the snowy trail, letters tucked tight, horse hooves muffled by snow. Then he began reinforcing the ranch like a man expecting siege. He barred the windows with planks and hammered fresh boards across the barn doors. He buried caches of ammunition beneath floorboards. He taught May and Ruth how to recognize the sound of a rifle being cocked from 50 feet away. And he began to plan. He mapped every slope, every ditch, every place a man could hide or be ambushed. He marked them in the dirt with rocks and branches, teaching Eli upon his return. If they come from the north, Calder said, we funnel them toward the gorge. Let the land do the work. And if they come from town, May asked, then we pray the town still remembers its own conscience. 3 days passed in tense silence. Then on the 4th morning, the riders began arriving. But they weren't Gentry's men. They were Calder's past. First came Maggie Sloan, rugged, red-haired, riding her mule with a rifle slung over her back and fire in her voice. You think I'd let those Gentry rats bully my brother's boy and his 3 kids? Not a chance. Behind her, 5 more riders trailed in, dusted with snow, wrapped in wool and leather and calloused resolve. Old friends from his army days. 2 former loggers from his time upriver. A widow whose fence he'd once repaired. Even Harlan, the sheriff, rode in by dusk. You didn't mention kids, Harlan muttered to Calder. You should have led with that. Would you have come sooner? I'd have brought half the county. They bunked in the barn, drank from tin cups, sharpened knives by firelight, and told old stories between maps and patrols. May, Ruth, and Eli watched wide-eyed. For the first time, they saw Calder not just as a protector, but as someone others would fight beside. Someone who inspired loyalty not out of fear, but because he had once been loyal himself. That night, May crept into the kitchen where Calder sat oiling his rifle. Do you think Mama knew? She asked quietly. Knew what? That you'd do all this, that you'd care. Calder paused, wiping the barrel clean. I think she hoped, he said, and that was enough. As dawn neared, Maggie stepped onto the porch beside Calder. Word is Gentry's bringing 10 men, maybe more. Let them come. She raised an eyebrow. You're not afraid? I've seen death, Calder said. But this is the first time I've seen something worth dying for. In the barn, 3 small coats were hung side by side, tiny boots lined neatly in a row. A home was forming, not with bricks or laws, but with people who chose each other. And when the first scout of Gentry's gang appeared on the ridge the next morning, Calder didn't flinch. He just stepped forward, with an army behind him. The wind carried silence before the storm. Calder stood at the edge of the ranch, his rifle slung across his back, the snow beneath his boots packed tight and firm. All around him the others stood ready, Maggie beside the barn, Harlan crouched near the fence, the former loggers stationed at the ridge. May, Ruth, and Eli stayed inside, Clara with them, though her heart beat like hooves on dry ground. Then a distant sound, hooves, and more. Gentry came with 8 men, each one armed, each one cold-eyed. They rode in loose formation, not expecting resistance. At the front, Benton Gentry sat tall on a dark horse, the fur collar of his coat raised high. He looked too clean, too calm. "Well, well," Benton drawled, reining in before the gate. "The mountain ghost grows bold." Calder stepped forward. His face was unreadable. "You're trespassing." "I'm collecting," Benton said. "Those children belong to me by law. Or did you forget the contracts?" Calder didn't blink. "Those children were abandoned, left to die." "They were given to us," Benton growled. "What I do with them is no business of yours." "It became my business," Calder replied, "the moment they reached for my hand." Benton's lip curled. "You always were soft, Calder. That's why your family died." The words cut deeper than a blade. Calder's shoulders tensed, but he didn't move. Instead, Maggie cocked her rifle. "You say another word like that," she called, "and you'll never say another again." The riders tensed. Hands crept toward holsters. Clara watched from the cabin window, her arms wrapped around May and Ruth. Eli stood at the edge of the porch, his tiny fists clenched. Then a shout rang from behind the Gentry gang. It was Harlan, the sheriff, now astride his horse at the ridge, badge gleaming, voice like thunder. "Every man here is under the protection of this town's law. You ride against them, you ride against me." More riders appeared behind Harlan. Townsfolk, ranchers, friends Calder hadn't seen in years. Benton's eyes darted. His calm cracked. The odds had changed. "This ain't over," he spat. "Yes," Calder said, stepping closer. "It is." They didn't fire. Benton turned and rode off. His gang followed, looking back only once. And in that moment, the storm broke. Snow began falling, soft, slow, but cleansing. Inside the cabin, Clara exhaled the breath she'd held for years. The children ran to Calder as he returned, Eli grabbing his coat, May clinging to his side. "Are they gone?" she asked. "They're gone," Calder said softly. "For good." Maggie tossed her hats on the table. "So," she said, "what now?" Calder looked at the hearth, where fire danced and warmth bloomed. Then to Clara, whose eyes met his like two survivors learning to live again. "Now," he said, "we build together." And they did. They raised new fences, painted the cabin, built extra rooms. Maggie stayed on, and others brought wood, cloth, food. Townsfolk came by to help, not out of pity but pride. The cabin became a home, not just for them, but for others too, for the broken, for the lost, for those left behind. A sign was carved and placed at the edge of the road. "Hollow Creek Ranch. All are welcome." Spring thawed the edges of the forest. Creeks gurgled again. Green slipped through the snow, and the cabin, no, the home, buzzed with life. Calder's days were now filled with hammering, fence mending, and laughter. Ruth and May helped Maggie plant seeds. Eli followed Calder like a shadow, learning how to ride, how to split wood, how to be brave without needing to be hard. Clara baked, cleaned, stitched, and tended to the children, but also at last allowed herself to rest and smile and hope. But hope has its price, and peace has a past. It began with a letter, tied to a crow's leg, left on the cabin's porch early one morning. Calder found it first. He untied the string, unfolded the paper, and read slowly, his jaw tightening with each line. Clara entered seconds later, wiping her hands. "What's wrong?" she asked. Calder handed her the letter. No words, just a nod. She read it once, then again. Her hands shook. "Clara, if you're alive, please come home. He's gone. I was wrong. Please, come back." Sarah, her sister, the one who watched her wedding and turned her back when Clara cried for help. The one who believed Gregory when he lied. Who helped Clara's ex-husband cover bruises with charm and secrets with scripture. Clara's heart twisted. "You don't have to go," Calder said gently, almost quietly. She turned to him, surprised by the pain in his voice. "I don't want to lose you," he added. She stepped toward him, laid her palm on his chest. "You won't." That night, Clara sat with Maggie by the hearth. "I don't know if I should go," Clara confessed. "What if it's a trick? What if Gregory isn't really gone?" Maggie stirred her tea. "Sometimes," she said, "facing your past is the only way to free yourself from it. And what if it breaks everything we've built here?" Maggie looked her in the eye. "Then it wasn't strong enough to begin with." The next morning, Calder helped Clara pack a small satchel. May and Ruth hugged her tightly. Eli cried and promised to guard the chickens. Clara touched Calder's cheek. "I'll be back, I swear it." He kissed her forehead. "I believe you." And then she left, riding alone, into the valley, toward a family that once betrayed her, but might now be begging for forgiveness. Behind her, Calder stood at the gate long after her silhouette vanished. And in his heart, a storm was rising. Clara's journey back to her childhood home wasn't long by miles, but it was 1,000 lifetimes in memory. She passed the old windmill her father built, now leaning like a drunk against the horizon. She crossed the orchard where she used to pick apples with Sarah, where laughter once rang, before everything soured. The house came into view as the sun dipped behind the hills. A thin wisp of smoke curled from the chimney, and on the porch waiting was her sister. Sarah hadn't aged well. Grief and regret had etched lines across her face deeper than time alone ever could. Her eyes widened when she saw Clara dismount. "You came," Sarah whispered. Clara stood still, hands tight at her sides. "You said he's dead." Sarah nodded. "A fever took him, a month ago." Clara didn't cry. She didn't even breathe. She stepped past her sister, into the house that had once been her prison. Inside, everything was smaller than she remembered. The kitchen, the chairs, the shadows. She saw no signs of Gregory. But ghosts don't need to leave signs. They live in silence, in bruised memory, in the way your hand twitches near a stove, even when it's cold. Sarah made tea. They sat across from one another, as if strangers. "I was wrong," Sarah said softly. "I believed him. I didn't want to, but it was easier." Clara stared into her cup. "You let him hurt me." "I know." Silence. "Why now?" Clara asked. "Because I had to bury him," Sarah said, voice cracking. "And as I shoveled dirt over that man, I realized the only person who should have done it was you." They talked through the night, of childhoods, of Gregory, of the years stolen. And in the end, Clara stood up. "I'm not here to forgive. I'm here to close the door." Sarah nodded. "Then let's lock it together." Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Calder awoke to the sound of Eli pounding at his door. "There's someone at the edge of the woods!" the boy shouted. Calder grabbed his rifle. Out near the tree line, a rider sat motionless on a horse. A man in a dark coat, hat pulled low, face in shadow. Calder approached slowly, cautious. The rider reached into his coat, not for a weapon, but for a letter. He handed it over without a word. The seal was unfamiliar. The name on the envelope was not. "Clara, where did you get this?" Calder demanded. The man tipped his hat. "She sent me." "She's in trouble?" The man turned his horse. She said, "Tell him the past won't stay dead." And with that, he disappeared into the trees. The letter trembled in Calder's hands as he unfolded it. Clara's handwriting was rushed, smeared in places by what looked like tears, or perhaps rain. "If you're reading this, I made it to my sister. Gregory is dead, but I need time. Time to speak the words that were stolen from me. Time to bury the past in my own way. But there's something else. He left behind something I didn't expect, and it may come looking for me, or for us. I won't bring danger to your door. Tell the children I love them, but don't come for me." "Not yet." "Clara." Calder crushed the letter in his fist. His knuckles whitened as he whispered to the empty wind. Too late for that. Back inside the cabin, the children watched him silently. Eli was the first to speak. "She's not coming back, is she?" Calder hesitated. "She is, but we may have to go get her." The children didn't cry. They just nodded, like soldiers understanding the march ahead. Across the county, in a roadhouse near the tracks, a man with an old scar on his jaw read a telegram twice. He lit a match, burned the page, and crushed the ashes beneath his boot. "Clara, so she's alive after all." Another man beside him leaned in. "You think she remembers?" He grinned. "She doesn't have to, but her blood will." Back at Sarah's house, Clara stood at her parents' graves. A simple stone marked her mother's name. None marked her father's. She placed wildflowers down, murmuring a name not spoken aloud in years. Behind her, Sarah joined her with a bottle of warm cider. "I think you should know," Sarah said, eyes down. "After he died, someone came asking about you." Clara turned sharply. "Who?" "A man with a silver tooth and a cane. Said he used to work with Gregory." Clara's breath hitched. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd never seen you again, and that if he valued his jaw, he'd leave." But Clara already knew it wouldn't end there. Later that night, as she sat in her childhood bedroom, shadows shifted beneath the door. She rose quietly barefoot and opened it. There was nothing there, just the faint scent of pipe smoke, a smell she hadn't encountered since. "Gregory," she whispered, clutching the wall. She knew what this meant. Whatever he was part of hadn't died with him. The morning Clara tried to leave Sarah's house quietly. Her sister was already waiting by the horse rail, arms crossed, brows tight. "You're not going to disappear again without telling me." Clara winced, adjusting her satchel. "I have to go, Sarah. I have to end this before it finds them. You think I don't understand danger? You think I don't remember what Gregory was? I know what you're trying to do. But doing it alone doesn't make you brave. It makes you predictable." Clara paused. Sarah stepped forward, voice softer. "Tell me where you're going. At least let me send a warning if you don't come back." "I'm going to New Canaan. I think that's where Gregory's last business partner is hiding. That place is a pit of ghosts. Then maybe that's where mine belong." Meanwhile, Calder packed supplies into his saddlebag. Eli stood by with arms stubbornly folded. "We're going with you." Calder shook his head. "You're staying here. It's too dangerous. We've already been through danger, with you. And we're still breathing. We're not little anymore." Nora piped up, quiet but firm. "If Clara's in trouble, we want to help." Calder stared at them, at the eyes that no longer held fear, only resolve. And he knew. They weren't just his responsibility anymore. They were his family. He sighed. "Then we leave at first light." Clara reached New Canaan as the sun dipped behind its jagged rooftops. It hadn't changed. Still crooked boardwalks, men with guns on their hips and faces that said, "Don't ask questions." She asked anyway. It wasn't hard to find him. The man with the silver tooth ran a card house behind the saloon, called himself Mr. Delmont. But when Clara pushed open the back door, the men at the table froze. One rose. Well, the widow returns." Delmont smiled with rot-stained teeth. "Thought the desert had swallowed you whole. Or maybe Gregory buried you somewhere shallow. I'm not here to reminisce." "Then what are you here for, darling?" "To finish what he started, and make sure none of it survives him." She drew her revolver and cocked the hammer. Back on the trail, Calder and the children rode fast. Faster than was safe. A man at a way station warned them. Heard some riders went to New Canaan hunting a woman. Said she skipped town with something she wasn't supposed to know. Calder's stomach turned. He didn't ask what they meant. He just rode harder. Inside the card house, Clara held Delmont at gunpoint. "Gregory said you kept the names?" Delmont's smile dropped. "You don't know what you're asking for. Try me." He nodded toward the bookcase. She kept the gun trained on him as she moved. Behind a false panel, papers, contracts, women's names, ledgers, including hers, and dozens more. "This is how you made your money," she whispered. "Selling women like cattle." Delmont stood. "It was business. Don't make it personal." She looked him in the eye. It was personal, for every girl on this list. Just as she raised the gun, a crash, the door burst open. 3 men with rifles, and she was outnumbered. Clara stood frozen, her revolver pointed at Delmont as the door slammed open and 3 gunmen stormed in. They didn't hesitate. One raised his rifle and fired. The bullet missed by inches, striking a lantern. Firelight spilled across the floor. Clara dove behind a table, glass and paper flying. Delmont ducked, snarling, "Don't kill her, not yet!" Another shot rang out. Then thunder on wood. Bootsteps. Calder, bursting through the back door, rifle raised, jaw tight with rage. He fired. 1 man went down with a cry. Eli wasn't far behind, peeking from behind the doorway, a small pistol in hand. Clara's heart leapt in her chest. She had no time to yell, just act. The shootout was fast and brutal. Clara crawled toward her revolver as Calder traded fire with the last 2 gunmen. Sparks lit the room from bullet strikes. Nora rushed in and pulled Clara back into the hallway, shielding her with a coat. "Why are you here?" Clara gasped. "You didn't think we'd let you go alone, did you?" Nora whispered, holding on tight. Eli tossed Calder a second revolver. With both hands firing, the rancher took down another of the thugs. The last man, wide-eyed, dropped his gun and bolted through the side door. Delmont tried to run, but Clara was already on her feet. She slammed the ledger into his chest. "This ends now. You won't make it out of here alive," he sneered. But as sirens from the nearby sheriff's post began to howl, Delmont's face turned pale. "You called the law?" he choked. "No," Clara said. "She did." Sarah stood at the entrance now, rifle in hand. Behind her, 3 deputies. Delmont was dragged away cursing. Clara handed over the ledger to the sheriff personally. "There's enough evidence in here to bury half the territory," he murmured. "That's the point." Later, in the quiet of a motel room on the outskirts of town, Clara sat with Calder on the bed while the children slept on cots nearby. The adrenaline had worn off. Only truth remained. "You came for me," she said softly. "I'd come farther. I thought I could only protect them by leaving." "You did, but you don't have to do it alone." She looked at him, eyes damp with something gentler than fear. "Do you think there's still a place for someone like me? With everything I've been through, done?" Calder reached for her hand, warm and steady. "There's a place, not behind, not ahead, beside me." Outside, the town of New Canaan was still dark and broken, but in that room with those children safe and a fire in the stove, something like peace finally returned. But the road home wasn't over yet, and someone else was watching. Someone from the shadows of that list Clara had uncovered. The wagon rolled slowly through the misty foothills. Clara sat beside Calder, the reins slack in his hands. Behind them, Nora and the children dozed beneath a thick blanket, finally safe, for now. But Clara's fingers toyed with the edge of the folded ledger in her lap. Though Delmont was locked away, the names inside still burned through the paper. His arrest had only cracked the surface. "You're still thinking about it," Calder said without looking at her. "There are names here, judges, businessmen, sheriffs, people who paid for what Gregory and Delmont were doing. Girls might still be out there. Calder's jaw tightened. You want to keep digging? I have to. He nodded slowly. Then I'll ride with you. Back at the ranch, the valley greeted them with soft winds and golden sunlight. Eli sprinted ahead to check on the horses. Nora clung to Clara's waist, refusing to let go. For the first time in a long time, the cabin felt like more than walls. It felt like theirs. Clara stepped into the kitchen and froze. On the table, a bundle of mail. Calder noticed too late. I meant to. It's fine, she said, already reaching for the top envelope. But her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a photo, blurred but unmistakable. A girl, barely 14, standing beside Gregory, taken in Dodge City, after Clara had left. A small slip of paper fell out beneath it. You stopped one. Let's see if you stopped them all. Her face paled. This isn't over. That night, Clara sat by the fire, ledger and letter on her lap. Calder sat nearby, sharpening a blade with slow, careful strokes. He has friends still out there, she whispered. Then they don't know who they're dealing with. I won't let Nora live in fear. She won't, not while we stand between them. She looked at him, this man who had never asked for anything, and had offered everything. You know this could bring war to our doorstep. I've lived with ghosts too long. It's time someone laid them to rest. The next morning, Clara rode into town with the ledger in her saddlebag and a revolver on her hip. Sheriff Lang met her at the station steps. You ready to open every door this town wants nailed shut? You don't know the half of it. Then let's begin. But someone was already watching from a rooftop nearby. A figure with a silver chain and a quiet smile. You made it personal, Clara, he murmured. Now let's see how you like it. Back at the ranch, Calder kissed each of the children goodnight before locking every door, every window. The dog barked once, then quieted. The wind carried a whisper, just one word. Soon, the sun rose over the horizon like fire crawling through fog. At the edge of town, Clara stood before the judge with the ledger in hand, her heart thudding like thunder beneath her ribs. You're accusing half the territory's upper class, the judge said, his voice tight. I'm not accusing, she replied. I'm showing proof. Sheriff Lang stepped beside her, grim-faced. And if the law won't act, we will. The judge's eyes flicked to the crowd gathering behind them. Townsfolk, mothers, widows, young women in worn shawls who knew exactly what was at stake. Then heaven help us all, the judge whispered, and reached for his gavel. Back at the ranch, Calder sensed the shift in the air. The horses were restless. The dog refused to leave the porch. Even the children played quieter, listening for things they couldn't name. He checked the rifle twice before sundown. They'll come here, he muttered to himself, gripping the wood. Just before nightfall, a rider appeared on the ridge, then two more, their silhouettes sharp against the burning sky. He whistled low to Eli, who came running. Get your sisters in the cellar. Lock the hatch. Don't come out unless I say. Pa. Go, now. Eli obeyed without another word. In town, Clara was finishing her deposition when a message arrived, breathless, from a courier boy. They're coming, ma'am. Men from the north, armed, asking for Calder. Clara's spine straightened. Get me a horse. It's a full night's ride. Then you'd better saddle up fast. By midnight, the ranch was surrounded. Calder lit the lanterns at each corner of the property, visible flames to say, I'm not hiding. A voice called out in the dark. Hand over the ledger, McCall, or we take the girl. She's not here, he shouted back. And even if she were, you'd never reach her. Gunmetal clicked in the dark. Hooves scraped against dirt, shadows shifted. But Calder stood tall, every wound he'd ever known burning alive in his chest. For the first time since losing his family, he had something to protect again, someone worth bleeding for. And then hoofbeats. Fast. Closer. A wild ride through the trees. It was Clara, hair flying, rifle across her back. She didn't slow. She charged straight through the line, firing a warning shot in the air. The noise shattered the tension like glass. You want me? She shouted, dismounting in the firelight. Then face me. The riders hesitated. She threw the ledger into the flames of the front lantern. Every name's memorized. Every detail burned into me. Kill me, and it all goes public anyway. The leader cursed under his breath. Then they turned their horses, retreating, disappearing into the night. Calder exhaled. She collapsed into his arms. You're insane, he whispered into her hair. And you're still here, she breathed. At dawn, the valley was quiet again. But the war wasn't over. We just drew the line, Clara said softly. Now we hold it. Together, Calder replied. The house stood in silence that morning, not out of fear, but something sacred. Clara's hair was still damp from the bath Calder insisted she take. She wore a flannel shirt of his that hung loose around her shoulders, sleeves rolled up as she poured coffee into 2 tin mugs. Outside, frost clung to the grass, but a line of footprints led to the barn. Small, playful, the children's. They didn't sleep much last night, Calder said, stepping inside with a breath of cold. Neither did I. He took the coffee, their hands brushing. The pause lingered. You sure you want this life? He asked. It's not safe. It never really was. She looked at him. Truly looked. The lines on his face. The sadness he wore like an old friend. The quiet strength in his shoulders. I'd rather live one dangerous day with meaning, she said, than a lifetime numb. Later, Clara began plans for something new, a safe house. The ranch was remote, the valley secluded, and the people she once helped in secret would now have a place to run to. We'll need supplies, beds, a new well, she said, listing aloud. And protection, Calder added. This land might get more attention than we want. Then let them come, she said. We'll meet them with truth. And if truth doesn't work, well, you've got more than a few rifles. He chuckled softly. You scare me more than any man I've met. Good. That spring, word began to spread. A woman with fire in her eyes and scars on her hands had built something in the mountains. A ranch where no one asked what bruises you had. Where lost children were given names again. A second chance, Clara called it. Some days, she wondered if it would all fall apart. But every time she saw Calder lift Sophie onto the horse, or Eli helping mend fences, or the sunrise burn gold over the barn roof, she knew. This was home now. One evening a stranger rode up. A woman, her dress torn, clutching a child. No words were spoken. Clara just opened the door. We've got a place for you. Behind her, Calder carried firewood into the room. He looked up and nodded. The woman collapsed in tears. The woman's name was Naomi. She came with silence, the kind that held heavy stories behind trembling lips. Her child, barely 4, wouldn't speak either, not even to Clara. Clara didn't press. She knew that kind of silence. It had once lived in her bones, too. Naomi and her son stayed in the guest loft above the barn. The boy clutched a torn rag doll, missing one button eye. Calder carved a new one from a blackened cherry pit and sewed it on himself. Might not be perfect, he said. It's more than he's ever had, Naomi whispered. By April, there were 4 women at the ranch, each with her own sorrow, each with her own strength. Word had spread, faster than expected. This place wasn't supposed to be a movement, Calder said one evening, watching as Clara helped a woman repair her shoe by the fire. I didn't survive just to keep surviving, Clara answered. I need to build. I need to give. She touched the map they had pinned up, the one with safe routes, hidden trails, names of distant allies scribbled in red. I'm not running anymore. But peace doesn't last forever. One afternoon, a man rode up the hill. Calder saw him first. Broad shoulders, clean boots, eyes that scanned everything too quickly. Marshal? Calder called, stepping from the barn. Not quite, the man answered. Name's Declan Shaw. I hear you've been hiding some wanted property. We hide people, Clara said, walking forward, flanked by Naomi and the others. Some of those people belong to powerful men. Clara met his gaze. Not anymore. Declan tipped his hat, half a smirk on his lips. Just letting you know the whispers are getting loud, and the kind of men who come listening don't ask nicely. Then he rode off. Calder watched until he vanished over the ridge. This is only the beginning, he said. Then we'll finish what we started, Clara replied. That night, Clara sat alone at the table writing letters in the light of a single lantern. Letters to other ranches, to other women, to old allies who owed her favors. If war was coming, then so was a wall of fire to greet it. By the time the sun crested the valley the next morning, Clara was already in the field, hammering stakes into the soil with quiet precision. She wasn't planting crops. She was building a perimeter. Calder joined her with a coil of barbed wire. They'll come at night, he said. Then we'll light the night up so bright they'll think it's dawn. Inside the house, the women gathered. Naomi, Mrs. Dalrymple, 2 younger girls who'd fled from a mining town, and Ruth, who still hadn't spoken a word since arriving. Clara drew on the table with charcoal, a map of the property, their sight lines, the places to fall back to if it came to that. We don't fight for revenge, Clara said. We fight for each other. No one needed to ask why. That evening wagons arrived. Not enemies, allies. First came Mrs. Branson, an older widow who had taken in orphans during the railroad expansions. Then a wagon bearing the sisters from the Fremont mission. And finally a man Clara never expected to see again. Rufus Doyle, one-eyed, gruff, and once her father's most loyal hand. Heard someone was dumb enough to build a haven in Apache country, Rufus grunted, then winked. Figured I'd come die here if I had to. That night the ranch glowed. Fires and barrels dotted the fence line. Rifles were loaded and shared. Children were tucked in close, and women who had once flinched at every shadow now stood with pitchforks, blades, and even the occasional hidden pistol. And Clara? She walked out to the ridge where she once buried her son's toy. "This time," she whispered, "no one's taking anyone." At midnight, a dust trail emerged on the horizon. Dozens of riders, torches in hand, their silhouettes sharp against the sky. But waiting for them was a different kind of army, forged from pain, bound by loyalty, and led by a woman who refused to break. The men rode hard, but the ranch didn't run. What followed was not a battle, it was a message. And when morning broke, not a single woman was missing, not a single child was lost. Just bodies of broken men who thought they could take back what they never truly owned. Later, as the wind cooled the air, Clara stood by the gate, the blood wiped from her hands. Calder stepped beside her, his shoulder touching hers. "Still want to leave?" he asked. She looked back at the house, now fuller than ever, filled with the sounds of children laughing, a pot boiling, and the crackling of morning bread. "No," she said, "I think I've finally come home."